welcome to Recovery Daily. I'm Rachel, and today I'm going to talk about the sense of sobriety. And I'm going to talk about both recovery and sobriety and uh, stroke recovery. And I touched on yesterday how I had a stroke a couple years ago, 2 years ago this month, and how I'm feeling a lot of post stroke symptoms today. I haven't, I improved for a while, and then all of a sudden I regressed, and I, I just haven't improved over the past several weeks. Um, And so I'm kind of in a really difficult place right now, but I do have hope. Um, and doing this podcast is one of those things that's giving me hope because um, there's a lot to be said for speaking out loud what's going on inside you. And for so freaking long, I held everything inside. I call it my dark place. So back when I was drinking, I had this dark place, and that's where I put everything. Um, when I was unhappy in my marriage, um, whatever it was, and it wasn't just that, dealing with people who passed away. I was never able to actually process anything. All I did was put it in my dark place, and I would drink and I would drown it, and I never would actually deal with anything. And and when I got sober 7 years ago, to be 7 years in uh it was 7 years, April 28th of this year. So when I got sober, I was it gives you're forced to feel is the best way that I can say it. Um, there's no way that there's nowhere to hide anymore. And I still had all that stuff inside that dark place. And, and, when I was stuffing it and I was drinking, um, it's almost like it was growing inside me. It's like that dark place just kept getting bigger and bigger and just consuming inside of me. And when I stopped drinking, it stopped growing, but it didn't go away. And that's where all this other stuff came in that I had to do. I went to therapy for 2 years, uh, every week, and I got a sponsor, and I went to meetings so that I could build a network and a fellowship of people that were like me. There's so much value in being able to hear people speak your truth. Like there's nothing like it. To sit there. We all think we're so unique, and to actually sit there and have somebody say something that is exactly what you feel is it's it's just so moving. You all of a sudden realize, like, hey, I'm not the only one, you know. Um, and so it took there's lots of episodes to talk about how I started to clean out that dark place and make room for joy and serenity and all of that stuff that I feel every day. So I won't really talk about that right now, but I can talk about what it feels like on the other side. And that was another thing that I didn't know how to do before I was sober, was to be able to see an outcome before I even start tackling the problem, before I even begin to stand up to a challenge. I couldn't see it going well. Um, you know, one thing my brother said, and I'm thinking of my brother, of course, because he's been helping me. Him and his daughter have been helping me get this podcast up and going because of I can't deal with all the digital stuff, so they've been helping me out. And one thing that I'm thinking of is somebody that in his career journey told him that the amount of energy that you spend what ifing is, thinking about, well, if this happens, I'll do this. If this happens, I'll do this. And this happens, I'll do that. Um, that there's a point where you just have to trust that you have the foundation, um, and the knowledge and the intelligence to be able to respond to something when the time comes. And instead of spending your time what ifing, um, just enjoy the journey, you know? Anyway, uh, I'm thinking about the increase in my senses and my awareness, and although that dark place was still inside me, in the beginning of my sobriety, I started to notice things like, I remember driving to work one day and remembering noticing this little kid playing in the front yard. um, I was living in Charlestown, and I was just driving by. It wasn't the best part of town, and I saw this little kid playing in the front yard, and it was not like the best house or anything like that. But that little kid had so much joy, and I smiled, and I realized at that very minute that I was healing, because before that, when I was drinking, not only would I not notice that child in the front yard, but I was more concerned with making sure that I stopped on the way to work to fill up uh, my wine inventory so that I could drink wine, um, all day. And yes, on the way to work. And and so starting to notice, have those senses like become, come alive, was the beginning of what I noticed, was my recovery process. And it really, it's taken years for me to feel, to be okay with what I feel. Um, Fear, anger, joy, jealousy, love, all that stuff. It feels so weird when you haven't actually let yourself go through a feeling from beginning to middle to end and be on the other side of it. Um, to actually let yourself do that, it's a little icky. It's a little icky in the beginning. And that probably doesn't make sense to a lot of people, who are not in recovering from alcoholism. But but being ready and willing to feel that, feel those feelings is is kind of the beginning of working a program to stay sober. And what I had to do was really surrender to the pain. Um, I remember going to meetings in the beginning and I cried every single time I spoke. Every time I shared, I cried. And I'm not talking like a little choked up, like I have been doing, like I did in the last episode, and I'm feeling like right now. I'm talking like I had to stop and have a little bit of an ugly face cry in the meeting because there was so much pain. I had so much pain. Um, I was finally getting honest with myself and realizing that, it wasn't okay when I was driving home on Route 9 and I thought about running my car into a tree so that everything would stop, so the pain would stop. That's not okay, you know? Um, it's just it's wild. It's wild to think about, especially being 7 years sober now. Um, but it takes every single day. Sometimes it takes a minute at a time to be able to identify. You start really getting to know what are these feelings that I'm feeling, and what do I do with them? Um, and all these things I'm talking about, these are all things that, I mean, episode after episode, I could talk about each one, and I will. Um, but what I wanted to get to today is this the senses that I'm dealing with right now. Um, when I'm trying to recover from this stroke. And what's interesting about my stroke, because they're all different, they all affect everybody's stroke affects a different piece of their brain. Some people can't walk, some people can't move their arms, some people have their face, uh, one side is drooping, or, mine happens to be that I look 100% normal. You wouldn't even know that I had a stroke. And when I had it, um, I lost my speech, very much so. The key identifier for me, when I was in the hospital, while they gave me the clot buster to, there's like an hour period of time where they gave me a clot buster, which breaks apart any clots that you have. And so within that hour, they told me that I should be able to start speaking clearly again. And so I have a Weimaraner dog, which you heard bark yesterday. And her name is Autumn. And so I was telling the doctor in the ER, he said, "Oh, what kind of dog do you have?" Because he was like trying to get me talking to listen to my speech. And I tried to say I have a Weimaraner, and I couldn't say it. And so after the hour I could say it. It's fascinating. Um, but so today I don't really have any speech issues that you can hear. I have been encountering some issues where I'm saying the wrong words, kind of like when people get older and they just start replacing words and saying the wrong word, or for being forgetful and stuff like that. I have excuse me, I have that, but it's kind of exaggerated. I have it several times a day, which is not normal. where I'll replace words, like I'll say golf course instead of tennis court, or something like that. And so and sometimes I don't even realize that I did it. So my family has been letting me know now that that's what's happening. But otherwise, my symptoms are all in my head, which is in in some ways it would be comical, but it really is. It's all in my head, and my boyfriend has said that. Rachel, it's all in your head, and I'm like, real funny. um, but so I mentioned yesterday, I can't watch things moving. I can't watch them like a screen scrolling, uh, the TV. If it's a commercial, like a car commercial where they're driving the Mercedes along the back road or whatever, I can't watch the TV. And so what happens is my head starts feeling tight, like mine feels like there's rubber bands wrapped around my head, and it's like across my temple through the back of my head, like right through the center of my head. Like if you drew a line around where my eyebrows are, all the way around my head, that's where it feels like the rubber bands are. And if I keep doing whatever it is, like if you were to put me in front of a cell phone and just start scrolling, first of all, I'd be pissed off at you. And secondly, it would feel like like my head was just being squeezed, like the muscles are being squeezed. It's almost like if you were to try to if you were to try to make a fist, or flex your arm like you're Mr. Muscle Man, like flex your arm and don't stop and just keep doing it and keep doing it, and do it longer than you want to do it, and you feel like you're going to stop and you just keep squeezing your, that's what my head feels like, and it won't relax. And so um, I mentioned yesterday that I was I've been thinking about muscle relaxers, and that's why, because that's what my head feels like. And and if I continue to be exposed to whatever is making the this cell phone, if you were still holding the cell phone in front of you and you still kept scrolling the cell phone, I would probably throw up on you, and I would probably start crying. And it's just, I want to jump out of my skin. It's just so uncomfortable. And no offense, Bailey, but I'm just going to say that my daughter was driving me to on an errand a couple days ago, and she drives like I did at 21. And I we stopped at a stoplight, and I wanted to jump out of the car and start running. It was terrible, because I can't keep my eyes open in the car. I have to shut them. So if I keep them open, it gives me that same effect. If I shut them, then I think I'm just getting car sick. I think that's what it is. It's really difficult for me to figure out what's happening, but that disorientation that anyone would feel when they have their eyes closed in the car. So I do prefer to ride in the car with my boyfriend instead of Bailey. Although she's fun, she's a little whippersnapper in the car. So anyway, that's the pain that I'm feeling, and with this sense of sobriety, I have learned to sit with my feelings. I have learned to sit with pain. I've learned to understand that, I think I mentioned this yesterday, the only way to it is through it. And so I'm trying to do that now. But this through it sucks. I mean, getting sober sucked too, But this is just physical pain, and it's just terrible, and it's been making me think about mind altering drugs and alcohol that could make it go away. And that's kind of where my first red flag came up, which is ridiculous, but that was when I thought something's got to change and I got to do something and I have to do it now. And so that's why I'm doing this. I'm taking off of work, and I'm making a change because I don't want to live like this. I can't live like this. And so I think, so aside from pain and suffering and sadness and fear and anger and all that stuff, I think it is important to mention, since this episode is about senses, is is just like that kid that I saw playing in the yard. There are so many snapshots that I take today in sobriety. Um, and even with all the pain that I'm feeling now, I still am able to capture snapshots of joy and beauty in my life. And I wanted to end by talking about this because this is the importance of recovery. And this is the importance of me talking about it and talking about it every day, because I have to be able to take those snapshots. So some of the snapshots that I've taken lately, one was my daughter just graduated from college, so she played soccer in college at Wilson College, and go Phoenix, yeah, go Phoenix, and sorry if that's wrong, but I think it was Phoenix. And so her senior soccer game, I got to walk her across the field, and the team was lined up on either side, like making an aisle, and we walked down. It was me and her dad and her brother Tristan, and we walked through the field, and I took a snapshot in my head, because I looked to my left and it was Bailey, and she had not only the biggest smile on her face, but she had tears in her eyes, because it was that kind of joy that she was so happy that she had tears in her eyes. And I looked over to the right, and my son was on my right, and he lately is just glowing. I'm gonna have him as a guest on my podcast. He's already asked if he can be a guest. Um, so I don't want to talk too much about his journey, but I do want to say that that snapshot in my head, he has color on his face, he has weight on his body, he has a smile on his face, and it was just, the day was beautiful, and my two kids were by my side, and there's no place in the world I wanted to be at that very moment. And so that's one of my snapshots. Another snapshot that I took, and this is a snapshot that I took before I got sober. And this is interesting because the snapshot is a, although I have the view in my head of what I was seeing at that time, I also have a snapshot of what I was feeling at the time. And so this is interesting. I went to a holiday church show with my sister and my mom at my sister's church, and it was packed in there, and there was a point where everybody they handed out candles for everyone to light, and then there was a choir up at the front, and I think they were all wearing like white like robes, the choir, and the lights inside the church were really dim, and some they were singing some song, and the choir was like moving back and forth, in unison, and they sounded so beautiful, and the candles, and I took a snapshot, and I thought to myself, if this is what it feels like to have a presence of a higher power or something like that, and if that presence were here with me right now, it feels good. That's what I was thinking, because I didn't have any sort of faith by any means. Um, I always wanted to have something to believe in, but I can't honestly say that I really genuinely did. I think it was more of a acting as if kind of thing. And so that's and what I was feeling on the inside was I was hungover and I was tired and I didn't want to be there. Isn't that interesting? It was beautiful. I visually and with my ears and my eyes, it was beautiful. But on the inside, I felt horrible. It wasn't beautiful. On the inside of me, it was not beautiful. And so that's another snapshot. And I have a snapshot from 2 days ago, and I'll just share this one before I part. Um, I was I went out for a run. Running is something that I did when I first got sober. I have a friend of mine that I work with. She's still a coworker of mine, and she was so, so nice to start this little running program with me. And we would go running like 3 times a week. And running for me then was, I would run for like 30 seconds, and my head was so dizzy and my body was so malnourished that I couldn't run. But she just kept telling me it was okay. And we would run a little bit and we'd walk. And um, eventually I did run a 5K eventually, but that's a whole nother story. and and so I went running 2 days ago, and it's run, walk, run, walk. That's what I do. I'm not terribly fit at the moment, but that's just because everything that I'm going through. And I came back, and I just love to go running. It just makes me feel like every pent up anger or frustration or everything has just dumped out of me. It's just squeezed out of my pores, and I just feel so relieved. And so I came back and I sat down on my front stoop, and we have this beautiful view outside of my townhouse, and there's just a field across and big trees and stuff, and the wind it was very windy that day, but yet it was like 80 degrees. It might have even been like 70 something. And I had music playing in my ears, and which is a new thing, and that's another episode. Anyway, took a snapshot because I started having tears in my eyes, because I realized at that very moment 2 days ago, right now, this very moment, things are going to change. And that was my snapshot. And I'm going to remember that. I'm going to remember that snapshot, because I can see today that there's going to be another side to all of this. So, with that, Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.